to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very empowering show coming right up with special guest, Dr. James Creighton. And he's here today to share with us his new book, Loving Through Your Differences, Building Strong Relationships from Separate Realities. Now, Dr. Creighton is the author of several books and has worked with couples and conducted communication training for over 50 years around the world. Loving Through Your Differences begins to offer readers a new way of thinking about reality, showing how we each can interact differently with the outside world we create. So let's welcome to the show Dr. James Creighton.
Okay. Thanks, Marianne. Hi.
Hi, what a pleasure it is to have you here. And my goodness, what a great book. You have to be so excited because I know it's getting some great reviews.
Well, this is actually the first radio interview that I've recorded, so I'm doubly excited. New book, new interview.
Well, I know it's making such an impact. I mean, my goodness, loving through your differences. I've got to ask you, I know you've been working in this area for a couple decades. What inspired you to write this book?
Well, I've been married now 52 years, and all couples fight, but some couples fight just a little, and some fight a lot, and we were in the fight a lot category. And it hurts. And so I decided to find out everything I could about how to reduce the number of fights and make them less hurtful and so forth, and found some things that worked for us and thought I'd share them in case it helped other people.
Well, I can see where your book is making such a great impact because it is talking about some things that people a lot of times never consider. And so in your book, you talk about separate realities. What do you mean by that?
Well, you can start real simple. My wife and I go to a movie, and I found it really exciting, and she was bored to tears. And she doesn't really find car chases that interesting. And it's a fact that I was excited, and it's a fact that she was bored. We have different realities because the external event means something different to us, and so on. And while that's pretty simple and not terribly significant, the same thing applies when we talk about handling money, raising kids, sexuality, all the rest of that. All of those things, if we have different realities, those can become extremely important. And so it means that an event happens, two people have experienced the event, they literally have different feelings, reactions to it, based on the meanings that they hold inside.
Do you feel that that is one of the major reasons of conflict is that, we have these two different people coming from two different points of view?
Well, that's a major reason, and it's also one of the harder ones to deal with sometimes. I'll pick on these big topics like raising the kids or handling money and so forth, because they're not just rooted on I felt momentarily hurt, somebody said something, and so forth. They're rooted in genuine differences in perception, and it's those differences in perception aren't easy to change, and that's what we're dealing with here is how does a couple handle the fact that they really perceive things differently on something that really matters to the relationship.
Is the first step kind of just realizing that there is a difference in feelings and opinions, and then kind of moving from there?
Yes, a lot of the times we handle the differences by just thinking the other person's a bad person or foolish or misled or something or other. In other words, we kind of blame the other person for not having the same reality we have. And that's a bad start for resolving the issue because each person seeing the other person as a bad guy instead of seeing the other person as having a different reality that they actually experience, and it's a fact they have that reality.
I find that really fascinating because when we look at relationships, it's most people come with their own viewpoints and limiting beliefs, and we've got a lot of other things as well. And so, to even think that other people have a different point of view is, for some people, it's like a paradigm shift.
Yeah, and it's a rather important one because it's the only way to get out of the blaming and accusing thing is to recognize that this is a legitimate person with a legitimate experience of their own, and we have to deal with the fact that we really are having different experiences. A lot of the time, couples start out seeing the similarities between them. They think of themselves as agreeing on awful lot of things and so forth. And the longer you're in relationship, the sooner you come to realize that there are inherent differences in how people perceive it, and some of it's family-based. That is, your family interpreted certain things certain ways, and so on. Mm-hmm. Some of it military training, religion, all kinds of things. Just the thought, the issues you've worked on and thought about, and so forth. You've arrived at your own meanings, and these things happen so fast. An event occurs, you interpret it, and you don't even realize that you've interpreted it. It seems like the event causes the feeling.
Wow. And I think that's so important. I mean, I can think about, when I was younger, I just thought everyone shared the same viewpoint I did, so it didn't make sense when they didn't get it, whatever that it was. It's like, how can they see what I'm seeing?
Well, there's one experience that I had that showed this to me very clearly. This is some years ago, before the advent of cellular phones and so on. And teenage daughter promised to be in by midnight. It's now 1 a.m, and we've heard nothing. And first interpretation is she's been in an accident and something's bad has happened, and she has no way to phone us, and so forth and so on. And then the feeling we have then is to really be scared and so on. A few minutes later, we begin to think about she's defying authority, she breaking an agreement that she made, and so forth, and then we may get upset and angry and so forth. And my recollection of this is that for about an hour, we kind of circle around from interpretation to interpretation and so on. It's the occasions where we don't have any explanation, or there are multiple explanations possible, we can see that our feeling changes depending on which explanation we have.
Do you find that most people often gravitate towards the negative point of view when they're coming up with these, different assumptions based off of their viewpoints?
Yes, there are different personality differences on that. Some people instantly leap to the worst possible, and others are calmer and so forth. But it's still the same phenomenon that's going on. They're searching for an explanation, and which ones make most sense to them sometimes are influenced by their approach to life.
Mm. Well, in your book, you also talk about a lot of great things. It doesn't, in my opinion, it doesn't matter if you're in a relationship and having difficulties, or you're just reading this book so you can get better at relationships, because I kind of felt that way. I was like, wow, there's a lot of great information here. You talk about self-fulfilling prophecies. What is that, and what does that mean?
Okay. Well, first let me back up, because I remember an incident recently, a national incident, which illustrated this. The San Francisco 49ers quarterback, Colin Kaepernick, demonstrated when the Star Spangled Banner was sung, he would stand and raise his fist. And that was seen either as an act of great patriotism and honor and so forth by some, and almost treasonous by others. And the actual act was the same. meaning you brought to that act, you range wildly from one extreme to another. So just that was another example where that everybody kind of participated in that showed the difference. Now, the self-fulfilling prophecy, what you're dealing with then is you have an expectation based on all these meanings that you're carrying. And your expectation is so strong that you act in ways that create exactly the behavior that you think could. I know a woman who her husband is very kind of withdrawn. He really doesn't step forward much in terms of expressing himself to her, and she feels so hurt by that the minute he walks in the door, she starts in with little cutting remarks and little digs and so forth and so on. And the digs that she engages in would be enough to bring about the chill that she expects from him. She participates in creating the distance between them, and we don't even know whether he would come in and be open and friendly and so forth, or whether he would automatically be distant just because that's who he is. But if she stepped forward and gave him a big hug and really was welcoming, he might engage in entirely different behavior. One of the most dramatic versions of this was the study where teachers were told that certain students were really going to blossom this coming school year. And actually, the students that were picked to tell the teacher, there was nothing special about them, and there was no testing anyway. It was just teachers were told they were going to blossom. And lo and behold, at the end of school years, those students had progressed mightily compared to the other students. So somehow the teachers were engaging in some behavior that cued the students to perform well. So this is what you believe something so strongly, you cue the other person to act in a certain way, and they do, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in that it by God, you were right, they did act that way, but whether they had to act that way or you created it is unclear.
Well, it's so interesting. If we have a positive outlook to that or a negative outlook, we're going to get it.
Yeah, you get back in kind what you put out.
Well, it's something good to be made aware of, because if we have low expectations for people, I guess they'll meet our standards,
Well, and if you have one of these continuing conflicts in a relationship about, say, about spending money, anytime that topic comes up, you're likely to slip into your expectations and start cueing the other person to act in certain ways. And so these issues tend to kind of get reinforced and reinforced and reinforced because both people are putting out their self-fulfilling prophecies.
Wow, that's just amazing. Well, you also in your book talk about emotional reality. What is that?
Well, that's the conclusions, the emotions that result once you combine the external event and the meaning that you attribute to the external event. So it kind of goes back to the movie we went to. My emotional reality was it was an exciting movie. My wife's response was that it was a boring movie, and she hated it, and so forth. Those are both a reality. I actually had the experience of being excited. She actually had the experience of being bored. And to us, that's reality.
Well, when we know this information, how does this shape our relationships?
Well, what you're going to have to do is, if you acknowledge that the conflict is over different emotional realities, there's the whole book, and the rest of the book is all about ways of dealing with that and so on. But the first thing is that you have to start by accepting that it's okay for both of you to have different realities, And then you have to engage in behavior that helps you understand the other person's reality, why they feel the way they do, and so on. So if someone was raised in a family where money was scarce and a big drama issue and so forth, you need to come to understand what that means. Like certain things to that person that it doesn't mean to the other person. The other person may have been comfortable and money just wasn't that big a deal, and they're maybe casual and comfortable about it, while the first person is very uptight about it.
Mm.
So you got to understand what was going on and what caused it, and so on. And of course, that means that listening is an absolutely crucial skill in this thing, to be able to understand the other person and what causes their emotional reality.
Is that part of the way that we can then create a new reality where we're being more present and really listening, so there's not that much conflict?
Yeah, we're kind of after two things. One is to let into the possibility that there are realities other than ours. So then, in a way, that's an internal change in ourselves. And to work towards coming up with a reality that's a shared reality. It's kind of like finding a new reality that's big enough that both people can live with it and understand it and so forth. And sometimes there's almost a direct change in feeling that takes place. There's a couple that he regularly went on some camping trips with his buddies. And it seems like every time they got home, the minute he was in the door, she started quizzing him and kind of semi-accusing him of being off having an affair or something like that. And so on, he started reacting, and it would just build and build and build from there. He finally came to understand that she felt threatened and insecure, to which his responses were the worst possible responses. And that if he came in the door and recognized that she was going to feel insecure, if he would act in a way that was reassuring, act in a way that communicated that he loved and cared for her, that much of that particular conflict could go away.
Mm. Well, and I'm sure some of our listeners are going, okay, well, if I have a different emotional reality than my spouse, which reality is right?
Okay. Well, that's the implication of the term emotional reality, is that it is a reality in the person that feels that. Mm-hmm. So it's a reality to me that I thought the movie was exciting. It's a reality to my wife that she was bored by it. The point is that there are two realities, both of which are legitimate, both of which have a right to exist. So you kind of have to get back past that whose reality is right thing to find a reality that you can both live with, that you can share. So our friend who comes home and his wife quizzes him, if he can move his reality to understand that she's feeling insecure, even if he thinks she shouldn't, if in his reality it doesn't make sense that she feels insecure, if he can accept that she feels insecure, that is her reality, he can respond more effectively.
It really sounds like it calls for some very deep listening and kind of looking beyond what the upset is to really understand what's going on with the other person.
That is really the core of it. And the listening is also to be listening to yourself, because you need to be you need to understand why you feel the way you feel also. Mm-hmm. But yes, this is not an easy thing, but it is also a path to growth. That as you both begin to examine why you feel the way you feel, you get clearer on your feelings, and feelings start changing. But part of the book is about listening skills, and one of the best is a simple skill called active listening. When I say it's simple, it's actually hard work. You actually listen so closely to the other person that you can summarize in your own words what they're feeling or thinking. One of the problems is that if we resist how the other person feels, they actually persist in it. They'll hang on to it. They'll defend it, and so on. And one of the skills that's in the book, and one that my wife and I we're lucky to learn because it's really helped our relationship, is something called the 5-minute rule. And the principle is simply the same thing, which is resistance breeds resistance. And so what you want to do is create a situation where there isn't resistance. So the 5-minute rule is a rule that you agree on that either one of you can invoke the rule. You stop whatever you're doing and decide who goes first, flip a coin if you have to. And that person gets 5 minutes to say whatever he or she wants, however they want it. And then it reverses. The other person gets 5 minutes. And if at the end of the 5 minutes each, you've got to go another round while you do it. The reason it works is because for 5 minutes, nobody's telling you you're bad, stupid, or crazy for feeling the way you do. And without that resistance, it's kind of you soften. You don't feel you have to defend so much and so on. I myself find that after about 4 minutes, I'm repeating myself, and I'm even boring me. So on. Rarely does it end with some giant earth-shaking insight. It often ends with, well, I don't have anything more to say. And you just kind of, it dissipates, it lets go. But it's that hanging on energy that gets created by resistance that makes fights as bad as they are.
Well, on that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. We've been speaking with Dr. James Creighton in regards to his new book, Loving Through Your Differences, Building Strong Relationships from Separate Realities. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special, when you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place. Here's where their lives were forever changed and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 123 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
There are nearly 2 million Americans living with amputation. Many live right here in San Antonio. Becoming an amputee can be scary, frustrating, isolating, but there's no reason to feel alone. The San Antonio Amputee Foundation is here to help support you and guide you toward resources such as home and car modifications and even prosthetic limbs. For more information or to make a donation, visit saamputee.org. We'll help you live a full, active life, one step at a time. San Antonio Amputee Foundation, healing limbs, hearts, and souls.
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here today with special guest, Dr. James Creighton, and he's sharing with us his new book, Loving Through Your Differences, Building Strong Relationships from Separate Realities. Before we went for break, we were talking about the 5-minute rule and how important that is. And I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, this way people can say what they need to say. They can get it out. They can feel like they're being heard. And it seems like we're in this age where active listening is kind of an art form that's almost forgotten. And then they can get to a place where they can move beyond whatever those differences are.
Yeah, and it seems like 5 minutes is enough to be able to let go of some of the anger and defensiveness and so forth and so on. But we've occasionally gone, I don't think we've ever gone to the third round of 5-minute rule, but often to the second round, where we've still got some stuff left and we still have to say it. We usually don't finish up taking all of 5 minutes the second time. But it's a way of getting the feelings out without having to justify it and prove it and defend it and escalate and so forth and so on.
Well, you've got, again, so many great examples and tools and tips for people and just information here that they can use to transform their lives. One of the things that you talk about in your book is responsibility. What do you mean by that?
Well, how you communicate your feelings to the other person can have a great deal to do with whether they feel they have to react and defend and so forth, or they can hear it. If you tell somebody you felt really hurt by something, that's very different than telling them you hurt me. The second one is blaming and accusing them for your feelings. So you're back in the mindset that other people and things cause your feelings. Responsibility means that you take responsibility for your feelings. It's true I felt hurt. It's not necessarily true that you intended to hurt me. And you will defend maybe to the death the idea that you didn't intend to hurt me, the hurt is my problem, and so forth. So what we're trying, there's some skills in how you send your feelings so that you send them in such a way that the person doesn't feel accused, put down, so forth and so on. And the big crucial difference is that you communicate your feelings instead of your judgments. So it's I felt hurt instead of either you hurt me or you're a bad person for even saying something like that, or however it goes out. Most of us, when we're upset, have a tendency to put the responsibility for the feeling on the other person. I'm feeling bad because of what you did. The idea of responsibility is you own your own feeling. I'm having this feeling. I may say, I felt hurt when you said such and such, but I'm trying to accept responsibility for the fact that that's my feeling, created by the meanings I brought to the event.
Yeah, and in your book, you've got this great picture of a person that is locked behind their beliefs, and it says, when we learn responsibility, we are no longer the prisoner to our beliefs. And it makes such sense.
Yeah, the idea is enough self-examination so that you open up possibilities other than the beliefs you start with, because the beliefs you start with may be limiting and may be keeping you from exploring possibilities and potentials that you have that are limited by the beliefs. So the whole idea behind this is an exploration of what other meanings can I bring to events, so on, that open up possibilities that I currently don't give myself.
Mm-hmm. I know that you encourage couples to use problem-solving processes, and we kind of talked about that a little bit, where we're saying, well, It's not like, you make me angry or you're the problem, or we have a problem. It's just a little bit of different languaging. I'd love for you to kind of share that with our listeners.
Well, in the book, I actually go into a 6-step problem-solving process that begins with defining the problem and generating alternatives and so forth. My experience was that having a process that a couple agrees on helps them when they're trying to get to a solution, because they both know where in the process they're at. But there's some underlying things. Lots of times people don't really define the problem before they start coming up with alternatives and so on. I've even seen a PTA meeting the other day, a Parent Teachers Association meeting. They were worried about drugs in the school, and somebody said, well, I saw a great movie the other day, and somebody said, well, that'll take money, and pretty soon they had organized heck out of a bake sale to raise money, and I have no idea whether they did or didn't do anything that helped with the problem of drugs, because they so quickly slipped into raising money was the definition of the problem. Then I don't think that is a core definition of the drug problem and so on. So part of it is you define the problem clearly, make sure you're both working on the same problem, and so on. The other thing is that the problem can exist at 2 levels. There could be an external problem. You're short on money to pay all the bills, and there can be a relationship issue, which is one person feels like things they care about are not getting paid attention to, and the other person's needs are getting met ahead of them. And that has not much to do with the money. It has everything to do with what they're communicating to each other about how much I support and accept and love you. And sometimes problems involve both layers at the same time, and you have to be clear on what you're working on. If the issue is the person is feeling hurt, that their needs haven't been dealt with, talking about you get $50 for this and I get $75 for that and so forth doesn't solve the problem. The problem is at a relationship level. Do I feel valued or not valued?
Mm-hmm. Well, on the topic of value, do you feel that a lot of conflict happens over values?
A lot of conflicts do, particularly in issues like child rearing, and again, money will do that too. Mm-hmm. When I talk about values, what I'm really talking about is that values are the standards we use to judge things as fair or unfair or just, unjust, and so forth. And often values are in conflict. You can see this with seat belts. Seat belts are often very uncomfortable. And so a positive value is to be comfortable. That would be one value. But another value is to be safe. And those two are in kind of in tension with each other, that if you went to absolute comfort, you wouldn't wear the belt. If you went to absolute safety, you would always wear the belt, and maybe even an airplane harness or something. I don't know. And what often happens is that if I feel something is important, that I will see that as so important that I'll see the other person again as an adversary and so on. Whereas just using the seatbelt, one person might feel comfort's more important than safety, and vice versa. And they both are actually advocating on behalf of something that's good. Safety is good, comfort's good. The issue is which is more important in this particular circumstance. And so if you can get to the point, if you're having a conflict over values, that you start with the assumption that both people are actually advocating for some positive value, and you can get clear on what it is that they're advocating for, instead of seeing them strictly as an adversary that's opposing you and blocking you and so forth, your potential for finding a solution is much higher.
Well, and you talked about one of the issues that comes up is, with children, how to raise children. Can that be kind of a real battlefield when it comes to values? Because I know some people are a little bit more free range with children where other people are very protective.
Yes, and in some couples, it's a horrible battlefield that can even threaten the relationship itself. First of all, you have to start with an understanding that you bring a set of rules into the relationship, usually your family rules, how things were done, what you thought was good and bad when you were a child, and the other person brings their set of rules into the relationship. And the thing that makes them challenging is that both people accept those rules as true without examining them. And so he just accepts that's the way things are. She believes that's the way things are and can't understand why the other person's doing what they're doing. This is one of the values ones where you really have to talk about what each person is looking for. If you particularly value independence and free thinking and so forth and so on, that can be very threatening to the person whose primary values are safety and security and predictability and so forth and so on. And yet the thing about values is that we rarely are 100% on one side or the other. I certainly want some degree of predictability and conformity and so forth and so on, yet I highly prize individuality and so forth. And my wife might be on this particular issue. She might be on the, quote, the other side. But what we're trying to get to with values is that really aren't two sides. There are two things, both of which are matter and important. And the issue is how much value to give one versus the other in this particular situation. But the child rearing one is really difficult because both people come in thinking that the rules of their family are the right rules.
Oh, isn't that the truth?
Well, that's kind of a general principle, is that he comes into the relationship with his rules, she comes into the relationship with her rules. And to some extent, the only way around that is to come up with our rules. And we've done that. For example, this just shows up particularly in watching fights escalate, that both people engage in behaviors that make the fight get worse. And the only way you stop that is you agree together on rules that keep the thing from escalating. For example, one of the things that causes fights to escalate is to expand the issue. It starts out something simple like caps left off the toothpaste, and then it grows to, and he's always so messy, and it's a sign of how irresponsible he is, and the whole neighborhood knows this, and on and on. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And soon the fight has nothing to do with the toothpaste cap. It's kind of universal. He's irresponsible. And how you solve that, I don't know. I think you can solve the toothpaste one. But if he's utterly irresponsible, that's pretty hard to resolve. So what you can do, though, is you can agree to not expand the issue. It's one of the rules that my wife and I have agreed to, so that when we start out on toothpaste cap and he or she moves to next layer up, you're irresponsible or you're messy or you're always like this and so forth, we've agreed to not do that and to allow the other person to call us on it if we do, so that we try not to let the issue expand. There's probably 4 or 5 other rules like that and so on that that are useful for couples. But the whole underpinning is, since you both bring your own set of rules, that isn't going to work, so you're going to have to come up with an agreed-upon set of rules.
Mm-hmm. And start looking at it a little bit differently. Well, and it really puts in boundaries in how arguments take place, so they're not just downright hurtful.
Yes, that's right. The arguments escalate because of the behaviors that people engage in. It's not just bad stuff happens. We make it happen with our own behavior and so on. So there's a series of behaviors, from expanding the issue, blaming and accusing, bringing in other people as ammunition, and on and on and on. These are all things that cause us to move to higher and higher levels of escalation. And if you both can recognize those behaviors when they're happening, you can start putting limits on them. And you're still going to have arguments, but they're over the toothpaste cap, not over whether your other person's irresponsible.
Mm-hmm. Well, in your book you talk about family myths and how those influence our relationships. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about that.
Well, let me give you kind of an example I saw with a couple. He was raised in an immigrant family, and it was very important for them to show that they'd arrived, and therefore they liked to show off all the external signs of affluence. She was raised in a working class family where the ground rule was to not get above oneself. She went to college, and that even was suspect to some of her friends, because that was somehow trying to be above other people. And so when they went to buy a car, he wanted to get a Mercedes, and she was absolutely horrified, because for him it was a sign of they've arrived. For her, it was a sign of they were getting above themselves and separating themselves from other people and so on. And they were both acting out their family myth, if you will. The idea is we learn ways of being and relating to other people and so on, that everybody in the family understands and accepts as good behavior. And the other person, when you marry them, has a different set of what constitutes good behavior. And so once again, you kind of have to bring the family myths out in the open and begin to examine whether they're really anything that you want to keep owning and repeating, or whether you can move to a different perception of what's appropriate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting because when you have those kind of thoughts around just anything, we're talking about things, we're talking about cars here, and how affluence is perceived and how one family views it versus another. I mean, it could be a really big deal for some people. We're like, I don't want to be a show off, and someone else is like, based on their family upbringing, that's what they're supposed to do.
That's right. I'd like to be a show off and let them see that I've succeeded, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I could see it. My wife and I, she was raised in a family where the fundamental ground rule, you had to stand up for yourself, even if it got pretty noisy. And I was raised in a family where conflict just wasn't done. As a kid, all I could tell is that the adults seemed sort of itchy, but I didn't know why. And that's because they would never have a conflict in front of the kids and so forth and so on. And so when my wife brings in her stand up for herself, and I bring in it just isn't done, we're in trouble. And we've got to both examine our myths. And with hers, standing up for herself was great if you use some of the communication skills that we talk about in the book. I had to learn to step forward and be clear on things that bothered me and so forth. And that took some change on my part, because family myth was pretty strong.
It's interesting what we carry with us from our families, and it actually brings me to my next question for you, because in your book you talk about reframing, and I would love for you to share with our listeners what that means.
Okay, well, there's a wonderful example in literature, Mark Twain, where Tom Sawyer is required by his parents to whitewash the fence. Mm-hmm. And he's going to spend his holiday whitewashing the fence, and the other kids come along and tease him because they get to go off and play and so forth and so on. And over just a few pages, why Tom convinces them that it's a wonderful privilege to be able to whitewash a fence. It's just they're missing out on this wonderful experience, and soon he has them paying him so that they can help whitewash the fence. And that's an example of reframing, because what he's done is the original frame is it's an undesirable thing to whitewash the fence, and particularly it's undesirable if you can't have the freedom that other people have and have to work on the fence. He reframes it to it's a privilege to whitewash the fence, and has them pay for it. That's an example of a reframe. I talked earlier about the guy who comes home and his wife is instantly displaying jealous behavior, and she's suspicious and so forth and so on. If he feels controlled and gets all resentful and so forth and so on, they're going to have problems. If he reframes it to she's doing this because she feels insecure and needs reassurance, that reframes it into his engaging in behaviors that speak more directly to the problems she's really having, and doesn't lead to all the fights and so on that have, where he reacts to her being jealous and so forth and so on. There's another example that Stephen Covey talks about. He is traveling on a subway in New York, and everybody's kind of quiet and peaceful, and suddenly a father gets on with 3 young children, and they immediately start disturbing everything. They make noise, they bother the other people, so forth and so on. And he begins to remonstrate with the father about he's got to keep control and so forth and so on. And the father says, well, we just came from the hospital and their mother passed away, and I'm just not quite sure what to do, whether to try to control them or let them act it out or just what. And it's sort of like for Stephen Covey, the frame changed so radically that he was trying to, what can I do to help, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So that's what it means to reframe, is to change the meaning of the event.
Is that something that we can use with our negative judgments about ourselves or other people?
It is. You have to think of you have to come up with a frame for their behavior that isn't negative. If you start out they're being petty, or they're inconsiderate or something like that. Those are frames that automatically mean you will react in ways that will make the situation worse, not better. Reframing is one where you would consider alternative ways of explaining their behavior that are not necessarily negative. In many cases, reframes it still has to explain the circumstances, but it's like the woman who gets jealous when her husband's away for a few days and so on. But it needs to explain that behavior in ways that are not negative, not necessarily going to provoke antagonism and so forth. So if you frame it as she's feeling insecure or worried, you'd react to it very different than if she's jealous and controlling and trying to keep me under her thumb and so forth and so on, which will produce a whole different set of behaviors.
Is it possible to use reframing for our life story too, even if the our life story maybe hasn't been all that great?
Yeah, sometimes, and this is easier if you work with somebody like a therapist who's really knowledgeable on this stuff. But I think there's an example in the book of a woman who was molested when she was young, didn't have a chance to work that out at all with anybody. It was all kept under wraps and so on. And she pretty much defines her life as one of continuing victimization. She's being taken advantage of all the time and so on. And so she somehow got to reframe this in some manner that allows for the fact that she has in fact been victimized sometimes, but that that's not her assignment in life. That's not a role she has to take on forever. And she can begin to distinguish between things that she can change and things she can't.
Well, I think that gives a lot of people some hope, if they had less than a stellar childhood, they can go back and reframe it.
Yeah, and I confess it's easier if you're working with someone like a therapist, because it's hard to get outside yourself enough so that you can see yourself. Now, I think we also talked in the book, one of the techniques that people use a lot is what they refer to as positive self-talk. Most of us have this kind of running commentary on what's going on outside, and we make a mistake, and boy, are you an idiot, or something's coming up where you feel challenged and threatened, like I'm not very good at that situation. So, you start to program yourself to not be good in the situation. And most of us do have predominance of negative self-talk, that we're, running ourselves down and seeing ourselves as making mistakes and lacking certain qualities and on and on and on. And you can actually begin to to reprogram yourself, if you will, by using phrases that you repeat to yourself and so forth. I've had classes where we've had people coming up with a new phrase where they, first thing in the morning, stand in front of a mirror and repeat the new phrase to themselves enough so they're talking to themselves, if they will, to get the new positive self-talk in. I've also had people who wear a rubber band around their wrist, and every time they catch themselves doing negative self-talk, they give themselves a little snap on the wrist to shake them out of it and so forth. But it is possible to use self-talk to reprogram your self-talk so that you aren't constantly running negative things about yourself.
That's so important because that really structures how not only you feel about yourself but other people.
Yeah, and we all do it. We all have the self-talk going all the time. But it can either reinforce positive things, where you reinforce that you're competent to handle a situation, or you can reinforce that it's a threat and a danger and you might fail, and so on. Getting ready for the interview, it's been a while since I've done an interview, and I was catching myself running a bunch of things about mistakes I could make and how I wasn't up to it anymore and blah, 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 blah. I had to stop and reprogram. That's after a life of having done more than 100 radio and television shows.
I was about to say, I wouldn't believe it even if you said that, So. Because, I mean, you really know your stuff when it comes to relationships, and my goodness, and your book is just a great example of that. And, and I think I have time for a couple more questions here, but, you talk about just how important it is that we're different, and why is that? Because a lot of times people think, well, I need to find someone that's really kind of like me, so, life will be sweet and rosy,
Well, the person being different will challenge you. You're not necessarily picking the easy path by finding that someone's different, but you can learn more. If you are with somebody who has exactly the same feelings about everything, you just reinforce each other and stay in the same rut. The value of somebody who's different is that you will need to look at and examine and reevaluate your beliefs to make big enough beliefs that it can accommodate their reality as well. And you will need to get out of the idea that the person who's different is somebody who's bad. If you go into a relationship with anybody who's different is bad, it's going to be really hard if you're with somebody who has lots of differences.
Yeah, and that's something that can really, serve somebody throughout their entire life, regardless relationships. It could be in work, just communicating with other people, recognizing those differences and appreciating them. Gosh, that's huge.
Yeah, well, we're facing it now politically, where people are looking at the other people, and instead of seeing them as different and trying to consider their reality, we're just dismissing them as bad. And when we do that, nothing happens positive.
Yeah, it's truly unfortunate, because that's, they should all buy your book. We'll put it that way.
That's okay with me.
Well, and so what is the goal of your book? Because, I can see a lot of goals, but what's your goal for your book?
Well, some of it is, I'm in my 70s now, and it's sort of, hey, this is what I've learned so far about this. So that I can, because I have learned some things that sure helped me, and I want to pass that on. So it's really, this will help if you'll do it.
Well, and how important is that? Because this book, again, for those that are in relationships, I think it's a must read. And for those that want to be better at relationships, it's a must read. So, my goodness, and before we go, Jim, where can people connect with you and be part of your community?
Well, I just now getting that set up, because I said this is just kind of the beginning of the interview thing. You can contact me there's a web page at jameslcreighton.com.
Mm-hmm.
That's Creighton, Creighton. The books themselves are actually sold through the major, like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and IndieBound and so forth and so on, or through the publisher, which is New World Library, rather.
Mm-hmm. Well, and New World Library works with a lot of indie bookstores, so I'm sure your book is on the shelves.
It is, yeah. They just reached the warehouse yesterday.
Oh, how exciting! They're almost there.
Yeah, I still don't have a coffee yet, so I'm waiting.
Well, Jim, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Sure. It was fun to talk with you.
Thank you, Dr. Creighton. It has been such a pleasure to spend this time with you, and of course to talk about your new book, Loving Through Your Differences, Building Strong Relationships from Separate Realities. Again, if you'd like to connect with Dr. James Creighton, you can at his website, jameslcreighton.com, and we'll have the link below. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.